Welcome to Discovery Class. We meet once a week at Brentview, and we're here to study the Scripture. And I'm so happy that you could come and join me this morning. I'm calling today's study Highways in Isaiah. The word highway is mentioned 4 times in this book. And we're going to look at that today. And when we're done, I want you to ask yourself, having looked at these highways, which highway are you traveling on? As you know, the Old Testament of your Bible has 4 major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And there's 12 minor prophets. They start with Hosea and they go all the way through to Malachi. Now you and I are going to center our attention today just on the book of Isaiah. And his book is made up of 66 chapters. Isaiah prophesied for 64 years over a span of 4 different kings. So he said quite a bit. Jesus said, "My word shall not be broken." Poor old Isaiah, over his lifetime, his words had been broken over and over again. Imagine preaching for 64 years and your congregation didn't listen to a word you said. Wouldn't that be discouraging? Isaiah was a man who dealt with all kinds of injustices in his book. He preached against sin. He preached against the rich who oppressed the poor. He preached against immorality. He preached against religious fornication. All through his book, he uses metaphors. And he actually starts right off in chapter 1 with a metaphor. He says, it's from the farm. It's a farm illustration. He says, the ox knows his owner. The dumb donkey, he neighs when his owner comes. And the master nuzzles up against him. And he knows his master's crib when he's hungry. And he also comes. Isaiah says, but my people are never hungry. They're not hungry for God's word. They don't listen to a thing I say. They never come and nuzzle up to me and say, Lord, I love you. They take my name in vain and they take the Lord's name in vain. And in frustration, Isaiah, he says from the top of their head to the soles of their feet, my people are sick, like with a cancer, and there's no cure, and they're going to die. And Israel did die. God picked them up and he threw them into captivity to the land of Babylon and to the land of Assyria. And Isaiah, he watched all of this happen over a period of 64 years. Now, from Isaiah's vantage point, I want you to look over his shoulder and take a little journey down 4 highways. These 4 highways are mentioned in his book, and here they are, by name. Number 1, there's a highway of waste. Isaiah chapter 33, verse 7. Second, there's a highway of service. That's Isaiah 62:10. Third, there's a highway of holiness. Isaiah 35 and 8. And lastly, there's a highway of salvation. Isaiah 40, verse 3. Okay, that's what we're going to look at in this lesson. 4 highways: waste, service, holiness, salvation. Let's begin. Let's take in the highway of waste. Isaiah says in Isaiah 33, verse 7, take a look. Their brave men cry aloud in the streets. The envoys of peace, they weep bitterly. The highways are deserted. There's no travelers on the road. Now, highways in ancient times were very important. They were not easy to build. There was nothing flat in the land of Palestine. Everything was hilly, very mountainous. The roads needed to be cleared. There was boulders, there were cobblestones. Chariots had to travel, so did passengers. They had to go down those highways. They were very important. Kings traveled, armies marched, economy moved. Some of the great highways in the United States, you know them. Route 66, I-94, I-75, I-5, I-696. Do you know that the real estate covered by the highways and railroad trains in the United States is greater real estate than all the land in the United Kingdom, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Holland. North America is a big country, and it's covered with some mighty highways. Well, so did they. Now, listen to what Isaiah says about the highway of waste. He says, the land mourns and wastes away in the land, and I'm ashamed of it. It withers away. And in its withering away, it dies. I want you to become the apple of my eye, said the Lord. But you're not. You don't want to be the apple of my eye. You don't want to travel my highway. In our church, we have a membership in a lovely doctor and his wife. Their name is Dr. Wayne and Joyce Elford. He's a retired doctor. He tells a wonderful story about an experience he had years ago. Now remember, he was a doctor that taught doctors over here at the University of Calgary. He was invited one day to become a lecturer to the land of Saudi Arabia. That country invited him as their special guest. Now remember, Wayne, as an author and a professor, when you're working at a university, there's an old expression. You either publish or you perish. He published a lovely book. It was over 900 pages. And it was a textbook. And the textbook dealt with correcting, examining, and prognosing a patient when they come in for their annual checkup. Now, when he went to the medical school over in Saudi Arabia, he went to the city of Mecca. Mecca, remember, is the founding place of the religion of Islam. It was there that Muhammad was born. And it was there once in a lifetime that Muslims are required to go and make a visit. Once in a lifetime. Now, Wayne, being a non-Muslim, he was not allowed in the city of Mecca. His lecture hall was probably in a great big hotel just on the outskirts overlooking the city. Now, Wayne could not stay there. He and Joyce had to stay 60 kilometers away over in a city of Jeddah, over on the Arabian Sea. Now, in order for him to come for the 5 days of lecture, he had to travel from Jeddah to Mecca, and there was a highway. It was called the Highway of Righteousness. It was in Arabic. But on those 5 days that Wayne had to travel from that city to the holy city of Mecca, he was not allowed to travel on that highway. Do you know why? He was not a Muslim. Well, then how'd he get there? Wayne tells that he went across the desert. You mean they had a highway in the desert? No, it really wasn't a highway. It was like a Ho Chi Minh Trail. All it was over the sand and around the ravines, and finally it came out at his destination just outside the city of Mecca. And that was called the Highway of Unrighteousness, according to the Islams. So Wayne, being a guest doctor, teaching doctors from his textbook how to become the best doctors in the world, he couldn't get there from there unless he went through the highway of unrighteousness. Now, it does get funny, because he said that when he traveled, he went in a Jeep. Well, it was more or less a taxi, 4-wheel drive. And they had to go over the sand dunes and around the ravines. But this is where it got interesting. He found that as he traveled, the highway was littered with litter. When they would be coming riding, they would just throw their pop bottle out one window, their beer can out another. They'd throw their plastic water bottle out another, their diaper out another. In other words, that 60 kilometers through that highway of unrighteousness really was nothing more than a garbage dump. And Wade had to travel that to and fro every day for 5 days. Well, you know, in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah is saying this very same thing. He was telling the Jewish people, his brothers and sisters, why are you traveling the highway of waste with all the garbage when right over there's a highway of righteousness and you don't want to travel? Why? That was the mystery I read when I see that. Are you traveling the highway of righteousness? Or are you traveling the highway of waste? Interesting thought. Many people in our society, they don't know where to find that highway of righteousness. They think the highway they are on is fine. 2,500 years ago, before Dr. Elford went through that old highway of waste, was old Isaiah preaching and preaching and preaching. And they said, there must be a righteousness, but you don't listen to the righteousness. Why are you following your idolatrous neighbors? Why are the Israelites brokenhearted? You've sold your soul to the gods of idolatry, and you become wicked in the sight of God, and you have stayed from his highway, and you love the highway of waste. Amazing how many people have given in that, and that becomes their reason for how they've become. Now, I want to move on from that, from the highway of waste, and I want to talk about the highway of service. Isaiah 62 verse 10 says, pass through the gates. Prepare the way for the people. Build up the highway. Raise a banner for the nations. All of those words are very strong verbs in the Hebrew language. Pass, prepare, build up, raise. Have you ever gone to Trafalgar Square over in England? When you go to London, you'll find just down that long street, the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace. The Mall goes into a lovely park and it's called Trafalgar Square. It's very famous because in the center there's a very tall statue, and on that statue is a very famous British figure. His name is Lord Nelson. Nelson won the Battle of Trafalgar back in 1805 on October the 31st. It was one of the major battles in British history where the Royal Fleet of the British Navy defeated both fleets of both the French and the Spanish there at that battle. It cost poor old Nelson his life. He died in that battle. But anyway, his statue is in the very center of that great Trafalgar Square. Now, the square is sort of like a horseshoe. Over on this side, in this corner, you will find the Canadian Embassy. It's called Canada House. If you're ever there, go visit it. They'll give you a little pin to put on your lapel. Now, as you come around the horseshoe, here's another large building, and that building is the Royal Portrait Gallery. Some of the finest oil paintings ever painted are in there, Rembrandt, and it's free of charge. You go in and enjoy that. When you come around the turn, there's a church, and that's what I want to speak of. That church is called St. Martin's in the Field. Very pretty church. The auditorium is the same size as Brentview's. It's made out of stone, and it has a very large spire at the top. Many of the pictures that you see on your Christmas cards are pictures of that church. Anyway, they do the strangest thing in that church. This church is made famous because of what they do 5 days a week at noon. The best musicians in Britain perform a 1-hour performance at noon hour in that church. You're invited as a guest. You can bring your bag lunch. You can sit anywhere you like. And in that auditorium, you're going to enjoy one of the most amazing concerts. It's very reverent. You don't go in and yell and scream and at someone. You just go in quietly and sit down. That's what everybody does. But it's full. Now, I have a son that graduated from the music department over here at the University of Calgary. He graduated with a performance major in violin and viola. That's a difficult school to get in because their standards are extremely high. Their professors come from Juilliard, Curtis, University of Illinois, and some of the finest music schools in Europe. And they make you work extremely hard. But you know what they do over there? Their faculty is constantly looking for an auditorium that they can borrow, that their performers can do a run-up to their final concert. In other words, it's a dress rehearsal before the great event. Now, I got an idea. I don't know if this would work. What would you think if maybe once a month we went to that faculty over there at the University of Calgary and we said to them, we have a church that's right next to your campus. It's kind of like St. Martin's in the Field. We have an auditorium with a lovely opening and a lovely vestibule. Why don't you have some of your finest musicians, your orchestras, your choirs, some of your chamber music, some of your soloists, violin, harp, whatever you got, and we will be the ones that will host you. And we'll kind of become your little St. Martin in the Field, where you can come over and join us. And I'm going to have my friends and their friends and their friends come and sit down and listen to the concert. And you can bring your faculty and your concert and all their friends, and we've got lots of room for all of you. And when it's all over, we'll slip over into the gymnasium, and some of our ladies will serve you a cookie or a cake and a beverage, and you'll get to know who we are. Do you know why I tell you that, Brentview? We could become a highway of service to that university, and it didn't cost us a ding. All we did was open our doors and let them see this beautiful facility with all its amenities, and those people can come and enjoy it. Do you know what I think would happen? Those kids that are coming in the choir, those that are in the chamber music and all those orchestras, they're going to come in and they're going to say, man, this isn't a bad place to be. I wonder what it's like on Sunday. I might just for fun slip over and see what they do on Sunday. If they do, you have just, Brentview, opened up a highway of service from this church to that campus, and all it cost us was an invitation. Wouldn't that be interesting? If we look back at the end of the year and we had, well, let's make up a story. Let's say we had 12 concerts. Could be a Friday night, Saturday night, maybe a Sunday afternoon. I don't care when. Would you come? I'd bring Mary. I'd bring my neighbors. Why not? It's better than the CPO. Easy parking, easy in, easy out. How could you beat that? Imagine. Isaiah said, those students could pass through our gates. We are the church that's prepared the way for the people. Isn't that interesting? We are a church that when they come, we will build them up. Well, I never thought of that. And not only that, we'll give them warm hospitality and care, but beyond that, we're going to raise their music banner so that they will know all over the city, and especially over the campus of the University of Calgary, Brentview has become the St. Martin's in the Field to that campus. Just a thought, but I think it would work. Thirdly, let's talk about this one. This is the highway of holiness, I call it, Isaiah chapter 35, verse 8. And a highway will be there, and it'll be called a highway of holiness. The unclean will not journey on it. It'll be for those who walk in the way, but wicked fools will not be there. They will not walk that highway. There's an interesting passage on that if I can read it further in my Bible here. But only the redeemed will walk there. The ransomed of the Lord will return. They will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. Isaiah, he is giving a little carrion call to all those people that he would listen, his own people. Come, I have a highway with you, and it's called the highway of holiness. Do you know what holiness? We don't use the word holiness. We think it's a word that really doesn't apply to us because we don't fit. It's a big word that tells me that my personality will never reach that. Don't say that. Do you know what the Hebrew meaning for the word holiness is? Managed with excellence. That's what holiness is. Managed with excellence. You do that every day. You manage what you see. You manage what you hear. You manage your taste. You manage what you touch. You manage your money. You manage your job. You manage your faith. That's what it means. It's called a highway of holiness. Really what it is, it's a managed excellence. That's what we're asked to do as a Christian every day. Last week I did a funeral for a lady in our congregation that you would know. She was a charter member. If she had lived another 3 weeks, she and her husband would have been married for 70 years. Her name is Linda Oldhauser. When I was pastor of this church back in the mid-70s, and when I arrived, that lady was my secretary. She was the most amazing lady I could ever work with. I called her the highway of holiness. She managed with excellence. It didn't matter if it was new members class. It didn't matter if new members were getting a certificate when they joined Brentview Church. They got certificates when they were baptized. She put all of those together. We used to have wedding after wedding after wedding out here in this church because we were loaded with young college career kids, and they found their lovers over at the university, and there they met, and there I did the wedding. I can't tell you how many. I remember there were some Saturdays that Linda, I thought she was an air traffic controller. She had to have that wedding party off the runway before the other one landed because they were all 2.5 hours apart. That was a highway of holiness. Now, one of the things that she did that I thought was most amazing, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on Wednesdays and Fridays, she and I split up the day. Well, what did she do? I looked after, there was only 3 of us on staff then. There was me, there was Linda, and we had a janitor. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Linda would come with a little bag of homemade cookies, and she had a number of them. And she would leave me to look after her office, and she would go and make hospital calls. Now, we only had 3 hospitals. We had the Foothills, we had Holy Cross, and we had the General. That's all there was back then. She would leave about 9:30 in the morning, and she would make the rounds, but she would make a beautiful get well card by hand that she had typed. She was a magnificent typer. Do you know that when she graduated from high school, she had the highest score for timing on the typewriter of any girl that graduated? Now remember, those were not computer-run typewriters. There was no word processing. None of that. We had an old Remington. Thing was that long and that high. And it was noisy. I bet you could hear it if you were over at McMahon Stadium. But could she type? And she used to make all these beautiful get well cards. And she'd deliver them either on Tuesday or on Thursday. My job was to go and follow it up on Wednesdays and Fridays. That's what we did. And what she taught me was, in this highway of holiness, manage your time, Ron, with excellence. She was the first one at work, the last one to leave. This church ran like a Swiss watch. Everything was in order. It didn't matter if it was the ladies group, Pioneer Girls Brigade, young people's college career. They did it all. She had it all down, and there it ran. Milton, when I was doing the funeral, you probably didn't notice, but I was wearing a dark blue suit. I had never worn it before. That suit was given to me some time ago by a man who was failing in health, and he had had it tailored measured for himself. But he and I at that time were the same size, and he only wore it once. And he gave it to me and he said, "Kernahan, I want you to wear this." So I wore it. Milton, he told me that suit cost $2,000. I don't wear clothes like that. See this here? This is thrift shop. Milton, this costs $3. How do you like my nice little blue shirt? Milton, $1.50. I'm standing in Rockport shoes. I want you to know I go in style. $4, Milton. So when I was at Linda's farewell and I was wearing a $2,000 suit, I want you to know, Milton, I was out of place. But you know why I wore it? I wore it because I wanted to say a good farewell to a lady who taught me how to walk down a highway of holiness. That was managed excellence. The lesson she taught me has carried me all the days of my life. Okay, there's one more. We're going to call it the highway of salvation. Isaiah 40, verse 3. Comfort ye, my people. Have you ever heard of that? Well, that's what Handel starts his Messiah with. There's a voice calling in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord. Make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, and the rugged places plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed. Those are those opening words to that beautiful song, the rendering of the Messiah. Have you ever prepared the way for someone's salvation? Have you ever been instrumental in seeing someone else find Jesus because of you? Did you bring them to church? Was it one of your children one day after Sunday school? Was it your neighbor? Was it your husband? I'm going to give you a name. His name is Aristes de Souza Mendes. We'll call him de Souza. 80 years ago, right now, a middle-aged, high-ranking diplomat of the Portuguese government changed the lives of, they don't know how many. They think between 20 and 30,000. The city was Bordeaux, France. In that city of Bordeaux, there was embassy credited to the nation of Portugal. De Souza Mendes was the ambassador. Now, things began to really happen in that area. The Nazis were marching through Europe. The Netherlands fell. Belgium fell. France fell. With hardly any fighting. They just folded like a chair. Coupled in all of those countries was a nationality called the Jews. And these Jews, knowing what Hitler was about to do, ran for their lives. The borders all closed. They could not get out of Europe. But they heard if they went down to the southern border, to Bordeaux, there's a bridge right behind that city into the land of Spain, which is still neutral. And from there, they could flee and maybe go to Britain, go to North America, go to South America. That was their thought. Now, these were very successful Jewish families. And in order to get to the southern part, they drove all night. They loaded everything they had in a car, their children, all their assets, and they drove at night. And they drove through all the little back roads because they did not want to get caught. Because all the major highways were being sealed and they were being guarded and you were being scrutinized. So they fled. They landed in the city of Bordeaux. Hundreds of them. Now, back to de Souza, the diplomat from Portugal. He saw these Jewish refugees piling up at the border right in front of his office. What did he do? It was his consulate. He had to make a decision. And it had to be very, very, very soon. He went into a bedroom because he lived on the second floor of the embassy. And he actually went into a small mental breakdown. And he was in his room for 2 days. And then he came out. And when he came out, his hair had turned pure white. You'd have thought he was Moses coming down from Sinai after he had received the 10 Commandments. Moses was there with the Lord for 40 days. This man was in his bedroom for 48 hours. And he came out and his hair was pure white. And when he came out, he looked at these people and he said, what am I going to do? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this office of mine, and we are going to become a counterfeit office, not to print money. We're going to print passports and visas, and they're all going to be fake. And we're going to change the names of these people, and they're all going to be Portuguese. And that bridge behind us is going to become the highway of salvation. They're going to come off of me and go into there, and they're going to have their lives spared. He went down into the streets, and he began to interview these Jews. What do you do, sir? I'm a surgeon. Come, I want your service. And what do you do? I'm a professor at the university. That's wonderful. Come, I need your service. And what do you do? Well, I own a jewelry store. Oh, that's perfect. Come. He brought, I don't know how many staff into his consulate, and he began to fake passports and visas. They were all phony. And let's make up a story. Let's use some famous Jewish names. Henry Kissinger. Well, his name wasn't Kissinger. When they put it down, they call him maybe Gerigio. That was his name. Okay, you're going to be Henry Gerigio. That was his name. Maybe your name is Steven Spielberg. Oh, okay. We'll call you Bergio. Well, he went down and there was Bergio. On and on and on it went. All the names were changed, but they were all right because they were all documented on D'Souza's paper, and it was legit and it looked right. And no one at the Spanish border turned them down. And they went through in hundreds, they went through in thousands, they went through in 10,000s. Some think there were as many as almost 25 or 30,000 people went through that highway of salvation. Now, I want you to know that those that went across that bridge were going to be people that you'd know their names. Let me give you one. Have you ever heard of the name Rothschild? Maybe better. What about the Chase Manhattan Bank in New York? That was his bank. Rothschild was a banker, one of the most wealthy men in the history of the United States. He went across that bridge. That was his highway of salvation. It gets better. Some of those that went across the bridge that came out of Belgium, after the war was over, they went back into Belgium and they became the leaders in their parliament. They were politicians. They became the leaders in the Belgian society. Why? Because of a man named D'Souza, who saw that he could save their life and spare their opportunity, and there they went. And that's what they found. Now, you and I would think that a man like D'Souza would be well rewarded. Wouldn't you think so? After what he did? He didn't tell anybody back in his government, back in Portugal, what he was doing. He just did it on his own, but it cost him a tremendous price. In 1966, well, I'll go back one. He died in obscurity in 1954. He was disgraced in the eyes of the Portuguese government. He was teased and put down and imprisoned because of that decision he made to save all those lives. In 1966, Mendes was recognized by the nation of Israel, and he was called one of the greatest righteous among the nations of Gentile helpers to the Jewish people. In 1988, posthumously, Portugal withdrew its disciplinary charges against him, and all his criminal charges were dismissed. On June the 9th, just 2 weeks ago, 2020, the government of Portugal dedicated a monument in the National Pantheon in Lisbon in honor of D'Souza Mendes, a long-deserved official recognition to its disobedient diplomat. Now, what have I told you in this class? I have told you there's a highway of waste. Wayne Alford was on that highway. It's really garbage. I told you there's a highway of service. Wouldn't it be lovely if Brentview became St. Martin in the Field? I told you about a highway of holiness, managed with excellence. Linda Oldhauser. And now I've told you about salvation, the highway of salvation. D'Souza. Mendez, who took almost 25 or 30,000 lives and he gave them back to them so that they could live out their life forever in freedom and peace. All because he made a decision. Now, I don't know what highway you're on, but the highway you're on is going to really define who you are as a person. These are hard times that we're living in. I'm sitting beside the piano. Frida, if you're watching this, this is your piano. This is what you play in our class. It hasn't been played since you sat at the bench and played it last. I have a dream that one day we can take this piano, march it over there into the gymnasium, and we can hear you play again. We can't sing because our singing is a violation of maybe the spread of the bacteria. But we'll hum if you play. And I'm going to sit you all down in tables. We'll have 12 tables, many tables as I can find there in the storeroom, but I can only put you 4 to a table because I can't put you together. We'll give you a mask when you come in. I can't wear a mask because you'd never hear a thing I said, but I'll be back. You won't eat. I'll be okay. I can't give you a coffee or tea. You have to bring your own. And when you come and you're sitting enjoying your own, I'll be jealous, but you do that. And then when we're all done, I'm going to recruit maybe 8, 10 of you volunteers, Miriam, Judy, Deanna, Mary, some of you men, Alvin, and we're going to have to maybe scour our bathroom, these tables, chairs, all those railings coming up and down, in and out, all the handrails and the doors. But if you want to visit, in the back of your car, why don't you throw in your lawn chair? And we'll go into a little bubble and we'll in groups of 4, maybe 6, out in the parking lot where you parked your car. After the class, we'll have a visit. I'd really like that. Do you think that'd work? I hope so. Well, what time is it? Oh, I've gone over time. Sorry about that. You will come back next week, will you, to our discovery class? I'll look for you then. Until then, God bless you each one.